Good day, everyone. Today we are going to look at what is expected from you when you are writing your examinations. And we are going to look at Certificate in Early Childhood Education. So the name of the module is Early Childhood Learner Development and Learning. My name is Aunesam, and there is my contact details that you need to contact me when you are facing a challenge or you need further explanation on what we are going to talk about. So make sure that you get my number, you get my email, and the contact time is that one as well, because I'm a full-time employee somewhere else. So that is the time you can just contact me at 1700 hours to 1900 hours. We firstly have to look at Unit 1, which is General and Creativity Resources suitable for different learning areas or subjects. When we are looking at this, we are saying we are talking about young children. So the focus, whatever you are going to explain, the focus should focus more on young children that you are going to teach. This is not for secondary education, it's more focusing on young children. So we will be looking at the topic of your interest, the topic that you need to focus on. Kindly, you have to pay attention, and if you don't understand, contact your tutor. So you need to understand, for Unit 1, the most important thing you need to understand is the concept of growth and understanding. You need to differentiate between the two. What are the difference between when somebody is saying a child growth and somebody is saying a child development? So they have definition that you need to understand and that you need to know. So because in an examination, you can be asked to define or you can be asked to differentiate. You should know the difference between the two and you should be able to define them. It's also important to understand development happening at different stage and different ages of the child. What type of development is happening? If a child is 1 year old, if a child is 2 year old, what type of development is happening? You need to understand this development in different contexts, whether it's physical development, whether it's emotional development, whether it's psychological development, psychosocial development, whatever type of development which is happening, you need to understand what is happening at this stage, what is happening at this age as well. We also need to understand the beginning of human life. So where we start with menstrual cycle, we start with pregnancy, we start with antenatal care, and we also, giving birth and so on. So you need to understand the beginning of human life. How does the life begins? What happens when we have menstruation? What happens when we have what we call periods or menstrual cycles? What happens? What are the concepts that involves? For example, we have ovulations, we have different terms which are used for that phase. And we also have to understand pregnancy. What does it involve? For example, you need to understand what ovulation is all about. You need to understand gestation. You need to understand conception. You need to understand fertilization. So all those terms, you need to understand them because they involve the terms pregnancy. And you also need to understand what are the signs of pregnancy. When somebody is saying they're pregnant, what are the signs? What is that likely to happen? And you also have to understand the antenatal care. When somebody is pregnant, they have to go to the clinic, they have to see the doctor, they have to see their gynecologist and so on. What does it involve? What are the benefits for someone when someone is going to see the doctor when they're pregnant? What benefits do they get? And if you don't do it, what will happen? You need to understand all that because they involve us to understand the beginning of human life, the whole process of what happens when somebody is pregnant, what happens when somebody is about to give birth and everything. The whole cycle, you need to understand it, and you also need to understand the terminologies involved. So the process and ways of giving birth. So students must understand the process taking place before giving birth. What happened before giving birth? From the beginning when you had sex, then what happens? After that, the whole process of human life, that's what you need to understand. And at whatever stage involves, you need to understand the whole stage involves. What happened at every pregnancy term? You need, because pregnancy is having the first semesters, the first term, to say trimester and so on. What happened at each term of pregnancy? You need to understand what happens. Different types of giving birth, because people are also giving birth in different ways. Some give birth normal child, which we call normal birth. For some has to go through theater and so on. So you need to understand what exactly happens and what type of birth is available. Postnatal care, when you give birth, what needs to be there, and possible complications, what might happen, because a lot of people are only interested in when somebody is pregnant, so they are only interested in knowing the whole process. But a lot of people are not interested in what happens after giving birth, which can also be a lot of complications, which can also lead to a lot of depression, can also lead to other complications, not just for the child, it can also complication for the mother as well. So to understand what can happen and what can happen after a child is born. So what can happen to the mother and what can happen to the child as well. So students must also be able to understand different types of taking place in the following stages. We have the stage of development taking place in 40 weeks. What happens during the 40 weeks period of pregnancy? What also happens when you give birth during that 40 weeks after giving birth? What happens in infant stage, and what also happens during the toddler stage and preschooler phase. So it's also important for the student to understand the whole process of what exactly happens at each stage. When a child is infant, when a child is toddler, when a child is in a preschool, what happens for what are the phases happening for each development. So that was for Unit 1, and that's the most important thing that you need to understand in that unit. For Unit 2, we only have to look at the factors that are affecting early childhood growth and development. As I have indicated to you already, I said you need to understand what growth is all about and what development is all about. So for each stage, you need to understand. But now we are at early childhood growth and development. At first, we mostly focus on getting pregnant. We also focus on stages during pregnancy, and we also focus on what happened after giving birth. But this one is more focusing on early childhood growth and development. But you can only understand if you also understand what growth is all about and also understand what development is all about. Students need to understand the factors which influence physical growth, health of young children, and the importance of health in the development of child. So what you need to do is also to understand what exactly is the growth, what exactly is the factors that affect physical development of the child. What are the factors also affecting the health of the child? For example, if the child is not growing physically, what might be the factors that are affecting that development and that growth? And what are the health implications? Children need also to be happy. We should understand those factors which ensure general happiness of young children. What makes young children to be happy? What makes them happy? Very important, what makes young children to be happy. The impact of parents' attitude on development of children, because we said parents' attitude is also important on how children develop, because some parents might be very supportive, some parents are not supportive, and the living conditions, also negative parenting, all those attitudes really plays an important role in the development. When we are talking about development, it can also be physical development, we are talking about psychosocial development, we are talking about a development that also has to do with cognitive. All those type of development has to do with also how our parents react to us and how our parents' attitude toward development is. So the influence of position of the child in the family also have an important aspect in the development. When a child is a firstborn, when a child is the lastborn, when a child is the second, third in the sequence, all that the position itself also has important impact on development of the child. Because if you look at the firstborn, might have been treated differently from the lastborn, or the secondborn might behave differently from the firstborn or the lastborn. So the influence of gender on development is also important. How does gender influence the child development? If a child is a boy or if a child is a girl, how does it influence the child development? We also have to look at influence of personality on the child development, because when we are having kids in our homes, they have different personality. A child can be different despite the fact that they have the same parents. Their personality might also be different. So the influence of personality also have impact on personality. It can be social development. The way we interact with other people can also be because of our own personality. The influence of maladjustment on development of a young children, how the bad behavior can also have an influence on the way the child develops. The influence of empathy on the development of young children also very crucial and very important for us to understand. How does it this development, how does it affect the way we feel, how does it affect the way we think, and so on. So we also have to look at the influence of stress on development of young people. It can be stress for young people, it can be stressed because the parents are stressed. How does stress influence development? It's very important because it also has to do with our emotions. Because when we are talking about development, we look at physical, we look at emotional, we look at cognitive, we look at social, and so on. All that has to do with the way we develop as a holistic way of development. So, but when we look at stress can be, how does it affect the way we interact with people, our emotional being as well. It's very important for us to understand the influence of stress, how stress affects young people development. It can be their own personal stress, it can also be parent stress. How does it affect them? We also have the establishment of secure attachment between the child and the parents, and the achievement thereafter. How does attachment, when a child is attached to the parents, secure attachment and detached attachment, avoided attachment, we are all different types of attachment. But how does secure attachment between the child and the parents lead to better achievement? Self-image also has a factor affecting early child development. How does the child image, self-image, affect the way I develop? Because the way I look at myself, maybe when I go to school, learners are teasing at me, they are laughing at me because they will call me I'm huge, or whatever way it damages the child's self-image. And how does this self-image affect development? Then we look at Unit 3, where we look at the domains of whole child development. We look at the domains of physical domains, cognitive domains, language domains, emotional domains, and social domains. As I said, when we are looking at development, it's not just one specific thing like physical or social. It's for us to look at the child development holistically. We look at physical, cognitive, language, emotional, and socially, because all those domains affect each other, and all those domains contribute to development. So domains of self-image and domains on self-confidence, their moral development, religious development, creativity, aesthetic, aesthetic and sexual. So you need to understand those under self-image and um, how do they affect self-image? How do they affect self-confidence? We also have to look at in the relationship of the developmental domains, how each domain affect the other one. For example, if my physical development is affected, how does it affect my social being? How does it affect my emotional being? How does it affect my cognitive being? So you need also to understand the interrelationship between the development. What if I'm stressed? How does it affect my emotional being? Because how does it affect the way I also interact with people socially? So it's kind of every domain affect the other domains, but you need to understand how each domain contributes to the other domain. The way we develop the other domain, how does it how that interrelationship affect each other? How does that relationship between both domains, how does it affect each other? Development features of young children, you need to understand what are the features of young children, how do they develop? And for Unit 4, you need to look at learning in early years. Very important, because this is what you are going to do at school. You have to look at how children learn. So children learning, early childhood learning, they learn through observing, which we call through observation. They practice, they question, they imitate, they have guided self-discovery, and they also love through working. So you need to understand what exactly happening when they are observing. What do they learn through observing? How do they learn through observing? How do learners learn through practicing, through questioning, through imitating, through guided discovery, and through working? How do they learn through all those ways of learning that have been indicated? You need to be very clear on what happens through observation, what happens through practicing, and what happens through questioning. And also we have to look at factors influencing learning in the early years. What are the impacts of brain development on early learning? So what is that happens during the early learning period, in early years of the child? The impact of brain development. What are the critical periods of early learning? You need to understand at what age is more critical for learning, and the roles and implication of 5 senses on early learning. Very important for you to understand the roles and implications of the 5 senses, because it's very important for you to understand how children learn. Motor development and feedback from movement in early learning. So what are the motor developments and what are the feedback from movement? Why do we say the child needs to move, the child needs to walk around, the child needs to do this and that? It's because all that has very important role to play in the child's development. We also have to look at the importance and implications of communication without words. What are the implications, and why is it important for us when we are communicating to children, even without using words? It's always important for us to know what happens, because I can look at a child without saying anything, and it says something. What are the implications of us communicating to the kids without saying words? Why is it important for us to know? And the roles of crawling and talking in the early. Why do they need to crawl? because it's very important for their motor development. It's very important for them to explore, and when they're exploring, what happens, and they're talking, what happens, the roles of adults and peers in early stimulation of young children, and what are the stimulation has to do. Adults and the peers, what are the roles of the peers, what are the roles of the adults in stimulating young people to learn. When they are with their young ones, when they are with their peers, what do they learn? And when they are with their adults, what stimulation do we need to do that will make children learn? Then we have Unit 5, where we look at the way in which different types of early childhood play, development, learning in learners' domains. The importance of play. Why do we allow learners to play? Why do we buy all those small play toys? Why do we buy toys and so on? Why is it important to say they must go and play outside? So very crucial for us to understand what play does to children. Students must be able to define different types of play and their advantage. You need, when we talk about discovery or exploratory play, you need to understand what exactly does it mean. Firstly, you need to understand its definition and its advantage. What is that children benefiting from it? And we also have manipulative play. We also need to understand what manipulative play is all about for children. Constructive play, fantasy, motor physical play, games with rules. So for all these types of play, you need to understand their definition, what they entitled for, and you also need to understand their advantage for each type of play. So stage of play, describe the sequences of play in the following. So unoccupied, we have stages: unoccupied, solitary, onlooker, parallel, associative, cooperative, social, and so on. So for each one, you need to understand what each play does. So stage, for each stage, what does it does to the child? When we say unoccupied play, what does it say? And it's what stage is that of the child development? So the value of play in a child is very important for physical development. What does play do to physical development? As I said earlier, for development, we look into physical, cognitive, language, and social and emotional. So for us to understand the importance of play, we need to understand for physical, what value does it add? For cognitive, what value does it add? For language, what value does it add? And for social, what value does it add? As well as emotional, what does it add? When kids are playing, what does it mean to their physical development? What does it mean to their cognitive development? And what does it mean to the language as well? The principles that guide the marking and making and selecting of play products and toys. That's why it's very important as a parent. You need to understand the type of toys, the type of products that you are buying for them. While they play, children learn new skills, define themselves as individuals, practice relationship with others and with the physical world. When this is also fun, they are learning being themselves and sharing present experience with others. Good toys are toys that help kids to do those things. So what type of toys are you buying for them in order for them to learn in an emotional way, in order for them to learn socially, in order for them to learn cognitively? What type of toys are you going to buy for them? Very important. And playing with toys is the first opportunity that the child has to explore, interact with the world on their own terms. Through doing this, children experience the wide variety of a psychological benefit. So it's very important for us to understand that we are not just going to the shop and buy the toy, buy the guns, and so on. But we need also to understand what type of toys are we buying for them. Are they contributing to their emotional well-being? Are they contributing to their physical well-being? Are they contributing to their emotional well-being, and so on? So every time when you are buying the toy for the kids, just remember that you are not just buying the toy, but you are buying something that contributes to the development. While it might seem that the toys are just fun and games, they are also extremely valuable for learning and to shape the child in the years to come. By providing the child with safe and stimulating toys and play opportunity, you are giving them the education they need to move through early years of childhood, being happy, being confident, and being strong. So when you are choosing those toys, you need to understand that the child is being prepared to being happy, to being confident, to being strong as well. Information on parents and child or teacher can detect from watching how young people play. By observing them playing, you can also diagnose or help resolve issues. That's why you can tell that, oh, the child had problem when she was young because she never wanted to play with others, or when she's with others, she shows certain emotional behavior and so on. So it's very important. That's why play is very important in the child's life, because it also helps us to detect certain behavior. They can also evaluate children for developmental delay signs, autism, because you can see that this child is not doing certain things that other kids are doing at that age. So it's very important for us also to detect it through play. Teacher or others' roles in children play, the child lead the play and we just follow without arguing with them, and we're only there to help them. It is the uninterrupted play itself that grows quality for the child. You just sit there and observe, because play and development go hand in hand. Baby starts on their road to development through play from the moment they start moving. So the moment they start moving, they also want to play, they also want to explore already. Then that becomes a learning alley. So you are just a friend being there when you understand the child needs to direct their own explorations. So for Unit 6, we only need to look at influence of perceptual ability and learning style on early childhood development learning. So as I said earlier, this has to do with childhood perception and perceptual ability. We have to look at visual perception, and it is important for learning. We have to do with auditory perception, and its importance to learning, olfactory perception, gastric perception, and tactical perception, and both their importance to learning. For all these perceptual learning abilities, you need also to understand how are they important to learning process. So then we also have categories of perception and their importance. Give your own definition for the following. You have to understand what visual perception is all about, what auditory perception is all about, what olfactory is all about, what gustatory is all about, tactile perception, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Then you need to understand what are those learning styles are all about, because you can be asked to define them. The concept of learning, the term learning refers to understanding that every child learns differently. So we need to understand that when we have 40 learners in our class, every child is learning differently. And it's up to us as teachers to understand that we are there to support them, and we are also there to understand their learning styles. Individual learning styles depend on cognitive, emotional, environmental factors. So kids are coming from different backgrounds, they are coming from different environmental, and all this prior experience really contribute to the way they learn. So it's important for caregiver to understand the difference in learning style. Learning style group common ways that children learn. Every child has a mix of learning style. Some children might find that have dominant style of learning, while some they don't. Then we also have the three basic learning style: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning style. So for that, you need to understand, for visual, you need to understand these are the type of children who do what. For auditory, the same, tactical is the same. So you need to understand for each type of learning. For some kids, they are type of visual type of kids. For some kids, they are more of auditory learning. So you need to understand for each one what exactly does it involve. Then we have three basic learning skills or styles. The visual learning styles, example of early childhood visual learning, auditory, and we have also tactical one. And you must be able to give example for each. Then we have Unit 7, which look at technology stimulates early learning. How does technology stimulate? In our days, we leave our cell phone with the kids, we leave the phones on, and so on. And how does it stimulate their learning? How those games in your cell phone, when you are giving your child the cell phone to play the game, how does it stimulate early learning? How everyday technology stimulate learning, like the roles of ICT in promoting social, personal, and emotional development. In our days, when you give learners cell phones, they just concentrate on the cell phone. They lack that social being. Same apply with the adults. So how does technology allow us to be so disconnected socially? It's very important. Being just you are not communicating. How does it also affect our communication with others and the language development as well? How do people write in our days? Because of SMSs, they shorten up everything. How does it how does it affect language development? How does it affect communication? How does it affect mathematical and knowledge and understanding of the world? Perhaps we get more knowledge about the world through using technology. But how does it help us with social development? Promoting, how does it affect physical development and being creative? So you need to look at in a holistic way. When we are talking about technology, we need to look at it in a very holistic way. How does it affect us in a physical way? If I just sit in my corner for 2 hours just reading SMSs, 2 hours just posting nonsense on Facebook, how does it affect my physical being? So, and how does it affect my creativity as well? So effective practical use of ICT and appropriate use of technology in the classrooms is also explained here. How do we enrich, implement different type of ICT in our classrooms? Like overhead projector, how if I'm teaching something and I need to explain it well, I need to show it. Tape recorders, video cameras, pine, programs, keyboard, IC toys, softwares and internet, remote control, television, and laptops. How do they contribute to different types of development and learning? And also we need to look at classroom resources. How do you plan? How do you organize? And how do you control your classrooms? And hygiene in classrooms is very important for you as a teacher. Keeping germ-free classrooms, because especially nowadays when we all pick up, we observe the COVID-19, and so this has taught us so many things about keeping our environment clean all the time. So, and the last unit has to do issue of inclusive and special education, because we are saying when you are going to that school, you will find some learners who are having different disability, and how do you include them in your class without discriminating them? Because it's very important when we go to school, every child is equal to another child. There's no one to get special attention, because we need to treat them equal. We can't say we we need to treat them, every child is a human being. We don't need to discriminate them. Inclusive education, you need to understand the definition of what is inclusive education is all about. What is the definition of inclusive education, and what is the definition of special needs education? Contributing factors toward the need of inclusive and special needs education. What are the contributions of culture and neighborhood? What are the contributions of socioeconomic in the condition? What are the contributions of HIV and AIDS? And what are the importance of anti-biased attitude of teachers toward children with learning disability? Because if people are having learning difficulty and you're having biased attitude toward them, then it's likely that they will not learn better. Then we also have to look at the barriers to implementation of inclusive education. What are the teacher attitudes? What are the barriers? What are the physical barriers? And what are the appropriate, inappropriate? All those are barriers. Teachers can be barriers. Their attitudes, negative attitudes can be barriers. Physical barriers where a child cannot go to school because they are on a wheelchair and nobody is willing to assist them. Inappropriate curriculum, untrained teachers who don't know how to handle issues, how to handle those kids. Inadequate funding, poor organization, policy barriers, lack of adequate opportunity, and ensuring that classrooms are appropriate and lack of adequate support from parents. All those are also barriers to learning. Special needs problems experienced in early childhood can be about visual problems, can be hearing problems, attention deficit, and physical and learning disability can also be some of the problems. That possible risk indicators, you need to understand, you need to detect, and warning signs. If you pick up signs, you must always inform the parents. That's not necessarily that you are a doctor, but you just have to let the parents know that this is what you have observed, and they can always seek medical attention. So you also have to look at the gifted children. Gifted children are prescribed as children who have potential ability to perform extraordinary at that level, because when they are in their grades, they are better than the other ones. Academically also, you need to know how you attend to them. Also, professionals who can provide support in dealing with special needs are also listed. So those are the ones who give what? Medical personnel, therapists, or those who cannot speak well, or those who cannot walk well, speech therapist, psychologist, physio, remedial, and so on. You need to understand what are their roles, what each one does what. And also, some of the organizations that really support teachers and parents dealing with special needs, you need to understand that. So I wish you all the best, and call me if you need any assistance. And those are my numbers, and that is my cell phone and my email as well, and the time to contact me. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.